I'm Bruce Schneier. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Yeah.
I'm serious. Look, if there are no questions, you're all going to get to go early. All right, question over there. Oh.
I know we're going to get into questions on security, your expertise in QvesvesA, the books you've written, and your abilities to securely erase a hard drive by shaking it by an Etch-a-Sketch are all well known. But I'd like to tap into another realm of your expertise. Where can I go in Vegas to get a reasonably priced deal that's really, really good?
Okay, we can do this. So fundamentally, you've got two dynamics going on. You've got the first dynamic, right, which is good, cheap, and fast. Pick any two. So you can have that problem. The other thing you have, that's what makes Vegas interesting, is a lot of Vegas is subsidized by gamblers. Right? Go to places that want to have gamblers. Right? That's where they're going to get the food cheap because gamblers are subsidizing it. Right? This is a very weird economy here because stuff tends not to be normally priced. And I gave a talk a long time ago on hacking Las Vegas. And one of the ways to hack Vegas, one of your best bets for value, bets is a bad word, is sportsbook. Because you can go to one of those sportsbook rooms, bet on a football game, and basically drink for free for a couple of hours. Right? Because the turnover is so low. So for Vegas, one, best way to win is not to play. Two, if you're going to play and you want free drinks and play cheap, sportsbook is good. And three, if you want to play and know you're going to lose and have fun, my advice has always been the craps table. Because unlike any other game, you're all in it together. Right? You all win together, you all lose together. The pass line is one of the lowest house edges on the casino floor. Ignore all those other bets. They're scary, they're bad, enough math. So those are the places to go. You want good food at a reasonable price. You want to go places that incent people to come. The secondary casinos are desperate for people. Right? The top casinos don't need to offer discounts. Odd question, but I'll take it.
Hi, Bruce. My name's Damien. Hi. I was hoping you could talk about the advancements by NIST in quantum computing and the risk to public key cryptography.
All right, quantum computing is interesting. Quantum computing, it's largely theoretical, right? We have a quantum computer we've built that factors 15, I believe. And maybe it's a little bit bigger now. But there's a theoretical way of doing computing that's non-Newtonian, where things happen in parallel. And the question you ask is, what the hell good's a quantum computer for? It's not actually good for a lot. But it turns out that the easiest thing a quantum computer can do is factor large numbers. And the second easiest thing it can do is discrete log problems. So basically, a quantum computer is a public key cryptography killer. Right? That's its core application. Against everything else, it's hard to tell what it can do. At a theoretical level, the maximum it can do is decrease the complexity of any computation by a factor of a square root. Effectively, that means in symmetric cryptography, halving the key. Right, so if you have a 128-bit key that's secure against all computers, which it is, someone invents a quantum computer, you need a 256-bit key to get the same level of security. So against symmetric cryptography, quantum computers are not an issue. Right? It's really easy to double a key length. Against public key cryptography, it is a huge big deal because it could make our basic public key algorithms obsolete. Right? It can make factoring easy. It can make it linear. Now, things aren't all bad. There are a number of public key algorithms that use coding theory. Some of them been in the 70s and 80s, a little work in the 90s. Largely, they're only done by coding theorists, and we cryptographers ignore them because it is so obscure and so inefficient compared to RSA or Diffie-Hellman that we don't need them. But they do exist, and they would be secure against quantum computation as far as we know today. So when you look at quantum computers, I mean, looking into the science fiction future, it does have the potential of changing things, but not all that much. It doesn't make secrecy go away. Right? It doesn't make cryptography go away. It doesn't even make public key cryptography go away. It makes certain algorithms go away, and it makes certain algorithms insecure. And I think quantum computing is great. I mean, I love the theory. But, you know, is it going to be practical in our lifetimes? You know, it's hard to know. You know, right now there are some very, very severe limitations, like making the I/O work. But, you know, we're really good at this. This is now turning into engineering. When we come back here in 10 years, there might be a quantum computing room at DEFCON. That'd be kind of fun.
I'm a college professor from Canada, and I teach a survey course in security to first-year software engineering students. I use a lot of DEFCON videos and a lot of the expert content because they're not overly technical at this point. What advice would you have for me to try and what should I try and communicate to the students, and what advice would you give to them, seeing that they'll probably be seeing this talk on video in about 6 months?
You know, it's interesting. I think hackers are an extremely valuable part of society. And I wrote an essay some years ago on the mindset of hacking. And I wonder if it's something that can be taught. Right? You can teach domain expertise. Right? I can teach networking. Right? I can teach lockpicking. I can teach how airline security works. But the mindset of looking at systems in that certain sideways way, I think is almost innate. The example I always love to use, you ever hear of Uncle Milton's ant farm? It still exists. I mean, it was around when I was a kid. And it's this little plastic, narrow thing, and you fill it with sand, and you put ants in it, and you watch them dig tunnels. It's kind of cool. When you buy Uncle Milton's ant farm, which you can at any hobby store, it doesn't come with ants, because that would be kind of weird. Right? It comes with a little certificate that you mail into the company, and they send you a tube of ants. Right? So the normal person looks at this and says, whoa, I can get a tube of ants. I look at this and say, you mean I can send a tube of ants to anybody I want? What a great country. And that's thinking like a hacker thinks. Right? How can I take this system and make it do something that it's not supposed to do, that it's not intended to do, that the creators didn't envision it to do? And I think this is something you walk around the world doing. And I remember when I was a kid going into a voting booth with my mother. I mean, I'm yay tall. And I'm looking around and saying, yeah, I could cheat this machine. Right? You don't have to do it, but you have to think that way. So I like exercises that flex that muscle. Yoshi Kono teaches a course in Hacking University of Washington. And he has his students kind of keep a blog together on hacking systems. And one of them writes a post on what it's like to return a car to Avis and ways you can hack that. And someone else is looking at, some other random commerce system. And it almost doesn't matter what. Right? And how can you get more food at the Thanksgiving dinner table than you're supposed to? Just ways to think about how systems work, how they fail, how they can be made to fail. And all else is domain expertise. And all else, and that's going to change. I mean, the talks we're seeing here at DEF CON this year are not the same types of talks we saw 15, 20 years ago. Right? The world's changing, but that way of thinking doesn't change. Right? The badges get weirder, but right? It's all about, and the badges started out to be a little arms race between people who wanted to forge the badges and people who didn't want the badges forged. Now they're kind of taking a life of their own. So, and I've written a couple essays on this, and I sort of urge you to look at them and give them to your students. But, thinking like a hacker, and it's a valuable tool for all life, not just for hacking, right? Advertising is hacking, politics is hacking. Right? How can I subvert the system for my personal aim? And looking how to do that, I think, is interesting. All right, so as an aside, people who ask questions, you might notice you're being given an envelope. The envelope has my initials on it and has a number on it. Those of you who have one, save it. It will become valuable later. Those of you who don't might want to ask a question.
I wanted to hear your thoughts on the TSA pat-down process and the potential for it to make us less safe. I'll give you a quick example. So when I opt out, I don't go through any scanner, not even a metal detector, and I'm walked past already pre-screened flyers or passengers. So there's a potential that I could drop something off or pass something off to an accomplice at that point, because the line is grayed between cleared and non-cleared passengers. And then once I'm patted down, they often don't check the bottom of my feet and some other areas.
It's funny, I've noticed this too. I don't know if people have. You know, right now when you go through the full body scanners, you're allowed to opt out. And I really recommend you all opt out. You know, not because the radiation is going to kill you, but because if we don't exercise our rights to opt out, we lose them. And I opt out, and I opt out not to have a private room. You're going to do this to me in public so people can watch. And he makes a really interesting point that I've noticed. So the way this works is you stand in front of the machine, and the guy says, go through, and you say opt out. And you know, I've been told, it's never happened to me, that sometimes they ask you why and try to convince you to do it. They would never do that to me. They just say, okay. And they go in the little microphone and say, opt out male. And then some guy comes and pats me down. And he's right. They don't send me through the metal detector. They take me around both machines, the full body scanner and the metal detector, and do a manual pat down, which for any of you in law enforcement knows is kind of a joke. Because any pat down that is not personally embarrassing is actually not very effective. And I have asked TSA people and not gotten a good answer. Why, when someone opts out, you don't send them through the metal detector and then pat them down? The metal detector is right there. It's being used. They're shutting people to A or B. And I don't have a good answer. And I think that does make you a lot less safe, because it's really easy to send something through a pat-down. I mean, so the pass-off scenario, I think, is going to be less likely. I mean, you got to rely on, you know, getting lucky and things moving at the right speed. And if you get it wrong, now you've got the thing in your hand, and that's kind of awkward. But in general, I kind of think these measures are in the noise. You know, and you always see, I mean, we had a newspaper story this week about some 13-year-old who got on a plane without a passport and without going through security in like Scotland or something. You know, those things don't really bother me because you can't build a plot around them because they're not reliable. I mean, right now we know that, I mean, we don't know the numbers, the TSA doesn't report them, but some percentage of guns get through airport security. Right? They run tests, and airport security fails to catch some percentage of guns and some larger percentage of knives. Right? In a sense, that's okay because you can't build a plot. Now, compare a gun to a bottle of water. Right? If the TSA agent catches you with a gun, he's going to call the FBI, and at the very least, he's going to ruin your day. If the TSA agent catches you with a bottle of water, he tosses it in a trash and you go right through. What that means, even a reasonably good percentage of gun detection is enough to foil a gun plot, but anything less than 100% perfect water detection system is useless because you can keep trying until you get in. There's no penalty for failure in the water case as opposed to the gun case. Right, so I definitely agree with you that that's a very weird TSA procedure about not sending you through the metal detector when you opt for a pat-down. But I'm not that concerned about it because of sort of the dynamics of the whole system. Hope I answered that question. That's actually an interesting one.
Hi, Austin Holt. We met earlier.
Hey. Earlier here, I don't know if you wanted to, everyone was wanting their picture taken, and we were going to do like no talks but just pictures. But that doesn't scale as well as this does.
I've got a question about application security. So when we have commercial software or any type of product, I think it's important not to blindly trust the developer's claims that it works the way it's intended. They claim it to work for access control, any of the security functionality. A current way that that's being done internationally is there's security evaluations that can be done on the software. The common criteria is the current international standard. OWASP has the application security verification standard. My specific question is more about the international standard that's used today, common criteria between countries. Do you have any recommendations on how to improve the current system and make it better? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think it's becoming worse. I mean, I think you said something very wrong in the beginning. You said that, we're taught not to trust things and not to trust manufacturers' claims. We're stuck doing that. We actually have no choice but to trust manufacturers' claims. And when I started doing cryptography, I had some vision that we as a community or as individuals would analyze code ourselves and make sure it works. And I've never done that, ever. Sometimes it's claims of someone I trust more. I mean, I know the people who wrote PGP and I tend to trust it more. But generally, operating systems, code, even security code, we have no choice but to trust claims of vendors, of writers. I mean, I write something called Password Safe. I mean, I used to write it. Now it's being written by Rory Shapiro, a hacker in Israel. I'm trusting him. You're trusting him. You're trusting me. We're all trusting each other. Right? As soon as society gets specialized, right, at a very real level, we have no choice but to trust each other. That's what my latest book's about. I'm going to drink that bottle of water, and I'm going to trust that it's not poisoned, even though it's been opened. But I'm going to do it. And it's getting worse, right? I mean, in the beginning, we built, like the way beginning, we built our own hardware. Then we bought hardware and wrote our own software. Right? Then we bought software and wrote our own applications on top of it. Then we bought applications. Right? Now we're in the cloud. We don't actually own anything. Right? We're trusting at such a huge level. Right? Gmail. Anyone have any freaking clue what operating system Facebook uses? Anybody care? Right? We have to trust it. So one of the ways we trust things are through these standards. Right? And the thought is that there are some independent verification or auditing. And so common criteria is a standard. There are ISO standards. There are NIST cryptography standards. Right? And we look at a product or a service and it has a bunch of buzzwords and we say, oh, those are good ones. And in a sense, they're all sort of equally mediocre, because all the standards ever do is secure the system against a known list of attacks. Right? Yes, it does this. Yes, it does that. Right? You can never have a standard of, is it secure? You can have a standard of, is it not insecure in this particular way? Right? But when you look at new attacks, new ways of thinking, new threat models. So, I like standards, but I don't get too wrapped up in which one. Because what a standard does is it forces the vendor to have someone else pay attention. And that's generally good. So, I don't know if it matters that much. I'd like a better answer. I mean, this is actually a truly hard problem. But this is computer science. We can't even prove programs terminate. Right? Let alone, are they secure? I mean, all we can say is, and this isn't bad, right? I can't break it, and all those other smart people can't either. And they've tried for a month. But we don't know what happens if they try for 2 months. Right? You all know this. This is what hacking's about. And this is why a new person can go to an old problem and look at it in a new way and figure out a way in.
Thank you.
Hi, Bruce. My name is Pete. I have a couple of TSA-related questions. First one is, it seems to me that forever the U.S. Congress has routinely exempted themselves from all the crap they pass on to us. Taxes, insider trading, healthcare, whatever. But in this case, they're being subjected to the TSA pat-downs. There's a lot of YouTube and other traffic about very bad scenarios with congressmen. And I'm wondering, is that indicative that there's a new gang taking over or something?
You know, it's interesting. I mean, pilots had this issue too. Right? I mean, and some very, Patrick Smith, who writes the Ask the Pilot column, was very vocal about, you know, why are you screening pilots when they're controlling the airplanes? Aren't you? You're not thinking this through. And I argue that actually he's not thinking it through. Because the issue isn't screening pilots, the issue is screening people who have pilot IDs. So either, I have two choices, right? I either build an entire subsystem on pilot ID verification, or I just freaking screen everybody. And I think the same kind of dynamic is working with Congress. I mean, sure, you know, Obama doesn't get screened, he doesn't fly commercial. That it's just building in the exceptions was such a big thing, and they did airport security so fast. You know, if this becomes institutionalized, then you'll see, you know, fast lane. I mean, right now we have the TSA pre-check program. Right? I'm sure all of Congress is in pre-check. Right? You know, so those sorts of bypassing the line systems only happen after something becomes institutionalized. When it first showed up, it was, we need to do this quickly. So you didn't have that. But, you know, it's an interesting point, because you're right, they do exempt themselves. You know, and maybe it is that screening is just so quick. I mean, it's not like, you know, taxes, which really, you know, matter at some financial level, the way, you know, pat-downs don't.
Thank you. The other question is...
you don't get two envelopes, you know.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Hey, my name's Andrew. I had a couple questions related to that age group of kids.
I think we learned you get one of them.
And, well, I've got a 10 and a 14-year-old, and my brief story is, you know, I sat down at my son's computer in the kitchen to, you know, check some news websites, and his Skype log's open, and I see the message, "Don't run this file, Josh." And, you know, there's a message that says, "Oh, Josh, while you were cleaning your room, I wrote this little batch file that would open up terminal windows until your computer ran out of resources, so don't run it. You might not know how to stop it." When I got home, I thought it was a bad idea, so I wanted to tell you, don't run this file. So based on your research for Beyond Fear and your new book too, and, you know, about self-regulating groups and how they, you know, self-enforce and things like that, I wondered if you'd comment on, you know, how that age group learns to be responsible with technology and things like that.
So I have long said that the internet's is the biggest generation gap since rock and roll. And fundamentally, the young people are the one. I mean, in any generation gap, the younger generation wins because the older generation dies. And whenever you see things like, you know, young people don't understand the internet, that's nonsense, right? I mean, they're the ones who are defining the internet. They're the ones who create the internet. They're the ones who figure it out. It's the old people who don't. So, to me, young people have a much more intuitive grasp of the internet, of security, of the way things work, in ways that we don't, and ways that scare us. I mean, if you think about, you know, I don't know, the rock and roll, the generation gap. I mean, what did the old people say? What was the big problems? Right? It was, you know, drugs and sex and you know, women forgetting their place and right, you know, death of marriage. They kind of pretty much nailed it. And that's actually what, it actually ended up being pretty good. So the young people tend to be right. The really good person, anyone has especially teenagers, the ethnographer Dana Boyd, I truly recommend reading her stuff. She has a blog, she's written papers, and a number of her speeches are online about how young people use the internet and about how they assimilate. I mean, I'm looking at this audience, and you know, a lot of you guys know this, but your parents don't. And I think it really is, it's got to go the other way. I mean, I go to a lot of security conferences where, you know, a bunch of industry people talk about how young people don't understand privacy. I mean, do you forget? Young people care a lot about privacy, right? From their parents, from their peers. Privacy is a huge deal when you're 16. I mean, people are still people. But the intuitions are different. And Richard Thiem talked about this an hour ago. People are at his talk. Right? The technology at which you come of age is the technology you find normal. and the technology you're good at. This whole nonsense about child predators, kids know who adults are who pretend to be kids. They're not fooled. It's the congressmen who are fooled. Please.
My question is, how do we secure those internet-based applications where authentication is critical, and what are your thoughts on cloud computing?
Well, the two answers, right? Is one is we don't, and one is we do. And we largely do, right? Internet banking works pretty much okay, right? It's not perfect, there are problems, but we're good at authenticating things where it does matter, right? Gaming works pretty much okay. Now, if any of you work for big companies, you probably have some kind of secure access token. That works pretty much okay. There's no magic bullet, lots of ways we can do it better. We're always fighting usability, right? Nobody wants to put their thumb on a device. Nobody wants to learn to play Guitar Hero, if people follow that news story from last week, of implicit passwords, right? People just want to do their thing, and it's getting worse. And cloud computing is a really good example of this, right? Instead of my data on my device, my data is out there somewhere. But this is the future. People who are, talking about young people again, they are used to getting their content on the closest available screen. Right? At their house, at school, at their friend's house. Right? That's the way it's supposed to work. Right? People like it when they lose their iPhone. They get a new one, push a button, and all their stuff magically appears on it. And again, if you start interviewing teenagers, they kind of don't really understand where their computer ends and the net begins. Because that boundary doesn't actually matter anymore. It's disappeared. And I think actually, I'll sort of launch into this a little bit. I think one of the fundamental things going on in computing right now is this loss of control. Right, that we are losing control over the endpoints, right? I have no say in whether there's updates or not, basically. I have a Kindle, it's even worse. Right? So I can't even write a file erasure program for this thing because I can't get to the memory. Right? So we're losing control of our endpoints, and we're losing control of our data. I run Eudora, but I'm a freak. Right? Everyone else is on Gmail. Right? Their mail is on Google servers. So suddenly my authentication, which was I put this in my pocket, right, and I'm the one who's touching it, basically, so I can get by with just a password, because it's a password plus the fact that I'm not going to lose it, or it's in my locked house, now becomes just a password. So you need more authentication. We're not getting it because usability, people don't want it. And there are going to be a bunch of issues here. And the loss of control is a big deal other ways, right? It's being used, third parties are getting access to it for advertising, for marketing, law enforcement. It goes across borders, and then suddenly the NSA gets it, and it's in a computer in Utah. All of these things are happening because giving up control is such a powerful consumer thing. People want that. My mother does not want her photos on her computer. She'll screw it up. She wants Flickr to have them. When her computer crashes, the photos are saved. It's a Christmas miracle. And this is unfortunately, and I think it's unfortunate, this is going to be a much harder future to secure. Because security is about control. And I talked about trust. Now we have to trust all these entities, and you have no business relationship. Try calling Google customer service. Actually, Google has great customer service. The problem is, you're not customers. Right? Become a Google customer, an advertiser, and they have customer service all over the place. So, we're seeing these non-business relationships, this loss of control, all of which force more authentication, but you have the back push of users not wanting it. We've made some progress, right? The most common password is now password 1 instead of password. But that took a decade. Which means, in 10 years, password 1, 2, 3, 4. Where the A is an @ sign because we're all speaking Leet now, right? this stuff's hard. Please.
Good morning, Bruce. Yesterday, General Alexander gave a presentation as far as building a better relationship between the hacker community and government agencies such as the NSA.
I assume he didn't buy any of that, right?
Well, he failed to address a lot of the issues with trust, which, as you know, is a huge factor as far as building these relationships. How do you see the relationship between agencies such as the NSA and the hacker community developing in the next 10, 15,
I don't know,
20 years?
but it seems more like they lie to us and we buy it. I'm not impressed. I didn't go, but someone said there's an NSA recruiting booth in the dealers area. Actually, the Enigma's cool. Go see it. I have and someone told me, actually Richard Thiem told me this, that they have a list of attributes of the NSA on their signage, and one of them is transparency. Right, I mean, clearly we're inventing new meanings for words here. and too much of Alexander's talk was like that. You know, the NSA needs hackers. I mean, the NSA were the original, the original modern hackers. So they are going to be, you know, still a one-way conduit for information. I mean, they want everything we can do. They will give us nothing they can do. But, you know, this community is turning more and more legit. This is not the DEFCON of 15 years ago. It's really not. And so now, I mean, you have a place where instead of spot the Fed now puts a sign up. We're the Fed. Come visit us. Right? And so like the cryptography community, there is this information exchange that works one way. In the 1990s, the NSA started commenting crypto and Eurocrypt. Brian Snow was the first one to comment. He'd wear a badge that said NSA. Other people would comment, they'd have badges that say DOD or, you know, Fort Meade, Maryland, or, you know, they would you know, obscure who they were. And they'd sit in the back and never ask questions. And presumably, right, I mean, they learned a lot from the academic community, but they never gave a paper. They never presented anything. So, and that's the relationship now, because now the NSA realizes that so much of intelligence gathering is not crypto related, right? That it's computer security, it's network security, it's hacking, it's physical. So you're going to have this back and forth with no forth. And that is the way it will be. I mean, we're not going to ban them from coming because I think that's wrong too. And, you know, they could always pretend they're from someplace else. But, you know, a lot more people here are legit than were 15 years ago. So I'll bet the NSA recruiting booth, you know, is pretty popular. And it's often, sometimes they have cool swag, actually. So, you know, it might be worth seeing what they got. You probably can't take the Enigma machine unless you're really fast and get a distractor, or maybe 3 of them. So we should talk later?
That works. All right, thanks, Bruce.
This builds on a couple of questions ago with the Yahoo hacks and you know, the hack of the week, whatever, that releases passwords and stuff. Like you said, the passwords aren't getting that much better. And I see when I try to talk to my less technical friends and relatives that convincing them to, you know, do things like use different passwords on different sites and use more complex passwords and not click on that link from, you know, the guy who swears he's your buddy, that it just becomes so complicated for non-technical users that they just kind of give up and don't care about any of it. Do you have any suggestions or ideas on how to make that
So I think this is a failure on our part. I mean, there's a whole lot of it in our industry blaming the user, right? The user chose a bad password, he deserved to get it. I think we in the community are failing because we are expecting the users to choose good passwords, and they can't. For all the reasons you talked about, right? They're not going to. And I think it's our job in security to make security systems that work with actual users, that educating the user is a mistake. I mean, think of automobiles, right? The first automobile was sold with a repair manual and a toolkit. But automobiles didn't really take off until, you know, my grandparents could buy one. right? Or in computers until my mother got a computer. My mother is never going to do anything. Right? The only reason antivirus is on our machine is I put it there. But that antivirus has to work magically without her knowing about it. I want to actually upstream in our ISP. Why in the world does she get malware and spam? It should be blocked at the ISP. So I want us to build better security systems. Or, and Microsoft actually has some really good work now being done on security dialogues. The security dialogues, the dialogue comes up and says, if you're a normal person, it says, complicated technical gibberish. Make this button go away, yes, no. Right? That is a security warning to an average person. And whenever we do that, we are failing. Right? Unless we truly believe the user has a piece of information in order to decide which button to push. And we tell them. And Microsoft has some really good work on this, where they're trying to do this with dialogues. Here's a situation, here's what you know that we don't, here's why it matters, and here's what you should push depending on what information you know. That's a good dialogue box. Instead of, I'm the programmer, I have no idea what you should do, I'm gonna give up and make the user decide, because then it's not my fault. Right? So we need to get better. We need to get better at psychology of security. We need to get better at user interface. We need to get better at automatic security. Right? Spam is a really good success story. Anti-spam happens at the ISP largely, and I don't get any spam anymore, really. I get almost nothing. And spam's an enormous amount of internet traffic. But it just works magically. My mother doesn't get spam, and there's nothing she did. Right? That's good. That's what we want. The more we can do that, the better we'll do.
Morning. So I think one of the things that I find very useful about your writing is analogies bridging the non-technical and technical worlds.
I love doing that.
So one thing that I wanted to ask about was BYOD, and specifically, mobile device security. As you can see, there's many talks around mobile security here. What are some useful analogies I can use to get across some of the risks to my senior management?
And I think BYD is, again, this trend of loss of control. Right? I know people know this buzzword. It basically means your employer no longer gives you a computer and says, here's $1,000, buy a computer. And you know why? Because you've already got a computer, you've already got a cell phone. You don't actually want the corporate stuff. It's more to carry, and it just annoys you. Right? But then once that happens, you get the loss of control. So I think this is an important trend. This is a trend that is going to reduce security, a trend that's not going away, because getting out of the provisioning business, I think, is valuable to companies. They don't actually want to give their employees cell phones. And analogies, I really think of it as loss of control. Because now, as an employer, I no longer control that endpoint. It's very similar to home banking customers in some ways. Because you can imagine that banks could give each one of their customers an iPad. Right? You must bank through this, and I control it, and I set the patch levels, and you can't do anything else on it, so I can make it secure. But instead, I say, go to your browser and log in from anywhere. Right? And banking works that way. More and more of corporate IT is going to look like that. It's going to look like Facebook. Right? It's going to look like you log into this site. And the way that works, why banking works is you get a very, very limited number of things you can do. You don't log into your banking website and get a command line. That'd be cool. Right? You get a bunch of options. Same thing with Facebook. Same thing with all of these sites. So I think we're going to see more of that, less freeform, which is okay because most people don't need freeform. They want to do certain things. Right? They're going on a corporate website to fill out forms, to get some stuff to read, to share documents, to send and receive messages. So think of it more as a social networking site. And that's what I think the effect of BYOD. All right, I think I'm going to do quicker answers now because I'm running out of time. And no one asked me about SHA-3. What's wrong with you people?
Hi, this question is about your book, Liars and Outliers, and with a reference to the previous panel, which was talking about philosophy, history, and politics, which I'm thinking might be a trend now here that we're going to get into other things. So it says in your flyer that you quote Thoreau and Socrates, and as a former graduate student in philosophy, and being familiar with Plato's Republic, one of the diatribes in the Republic is about people that are experts in other fields thinking they can do philosophy. So I was wondering if you could expound on whether you think it's appropriate, don't shoot the messenger, for hackers to become thought leaders in other fields like philosophy.
Because hacking is not a domain, hacking is a mindset. 100% yes. Hacking is a way of thinking. Hacking is a way of looking at the world. We tend to be hackers in computer science. We could just as easily be hackers in biology. Right? We could be hackers in model trains, which original hackers were. So yes, simply because hacking is a way of thinking. Hacking actually is a philosophy. And then there are some things which can leach into other domains. Law is like that, because law is a way of looking at the world. So lawyers often write about very different topics. So you get law professors and read law journals. They're writing about all sorts of things. Because it's economists also. It's a way of looking at the world. So in that we can bring our mindset to other problem spaces, I think it's valuable. What I try to do in my latest book is to go the other way. Right? To say, here is what philosophy and sociology and psychology have to teach us in computer security. Right? I'm not trying to go there and tell them their stuff. I'm trying to go there and say, what do you got that's useful for me in my field? And that was a really interesting thing to do. And I had a lot of fun writing this book. Because I'm trying to, because security is fundamentally about people. It's about technology only a little bit. It's really about people. And lots of disciplines try in their own way to understand people. They do it differently. I started a workshop 4 years ago called the Workshop on Security Human Behavior. The idea was to bring all of these different disciplines together who are working on the same sorts of problems from very different perspectives, have them talk to each other. And that was way cool, interesting. Thanks.
Good answer, thanks.
Dodged that one.
Morning, Bruce. My question to you is, with the advent of social media and how people are blogging and on Twitter, there seems to be a large percentage of people who have this sense of futility and fatigue when working in the security industry. And I was wondering if you felt that contributed at all to actually solving some of the bigger challenges in the security industry.
I actually worry about fatigue also, because it's so freaking hard. Especially when you're fighting, fighting for privacy, fighting for security. There's so many forces arrayed against it. I mean, these days, I worry less about the criminals and more about the legitimate forms, right? I mean, the corporations, the governments, who are using political and economic systems to force technological changes to make us less safe. And it is really easy to get discouraged. And, I have no good answer for that. I mean, sometimes the best we can do is lose slower. And there's a quote that has sort of always stuck with me by Martin Luther King Jr., who said once that the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. I mean, what he's saying is that in the short term, we can lose and lose big. Right? But 100 years ago, half of us in this room couldn't vote. Right? 200 years ago, a bunch of us were slaves. Right? That history does get that. We do improve. Even though we hit some local minimums that look pretty bad. So I mean that's the advice I have for not losing heart. It's easy. I mean, luckily more and more of us come up, right, and do things. So people get tired can sort of sit back. But I've been feeling I've been writing the same essays for 20 years sometimes. I mean, CNN asked me to write about the Aurora shooting. What am I going to say? I flipped back. I wrote a long essay about the Fort Hood shooting. I said basically the same things about whatever university shooting that was. Virginia Tech. Right? So I mean, I can take the same essay across to Virginia Tech and write Aurora Movie Theater. It's just as relevant, but I feel like I've said it already. Right? How do you keep it? The problems don't change. Right? We're still fighting the same battles. And it seems like we have to win every time, and the bad guys only have to win once. So, no, this is hard. I mean, can't you ask an upbeat question?
Sorry, Bruce.
So I have to end soon. Okay, so 2 minutes. So, okay, yes or no questions. Go.
Okay, I will phrase it as a yes or no question. First, I was going to ask you about what political hack we're missing, but since you said the solution is lose slower, I've got the answer. With regard to software, it seems that Chrome, for example, auto-updates, and that it's been a very good thing for computer security. In general, I think a lot of people in this room probably opposed to software automatically updating, and a lot of users are opposed to it because historically it broke functionality. So my question is, at this point in time, have we reached the point where effectively all software should update automatically based on a trust relationship?
Yes.
Thank you.
Hang on. Wait, okay. How many envelopes do you have left?
Wait, got a question for you.
No, don't count them. Just take them and go back along the line and hand them out in order. Because I'm sorry. So a couple of things will happen now. I have here. So I should cover this. I'm now going to a book signing. This is my book. Ta-da! It's available at the bookstore, and I'll be going there and doing a signing. I have this, which is the book flyer. It's kind of the thin version of the book. It doesn't have as many words, but on the plus side, it's free, and I have piles there and there, so feel free to grab one. Those of you who have cards, this is the galley of the book. Now, what a galley is before the book is published, the publisher prints these and gives them to book reviewers, basically. So those of you with cards, if you come here, I will give you a galley. The galley has more typos than the real book, so you got to sort of accept that. And in return, I ask that you mention, blog, tweet, anything, something that you read the book. I'd really appreciate that. So that's the plan for now. I'm going to go right here where this box is, and then I will go to the book. So I think I should stop at the Q&A area first and say hi. So I'll do that. So I'll do that for like 15 minutes, then I'll go to the book signing, and then the rest of our day will continue, and we'll all have fun. Thank you for coming. Thanks for coming to DEF CON. I'm Bruce Schneier. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Yeah.
I'm serious. Look, if there are no questions, you're all going to get to go early. All right, question over there. Oh.
I know we're going to get into questions on security, your expertise in QvesvesA, the books you've written, and your abilities to securely erase a hard drive by shaking it by an Etch-a-Sketch are all well known. But I'd like to tap into another realm of your expertise. Where can I go in Vegas to get a reasonably priced deal that's really, really good?
Okay, we can do this. So fundamentally, you've got two dynamics going on. You've got the first dynamic, right, which is good, cheap, and fast. Pick any two. The pass line is one of the lowest house edges on the casino floor. Ignore all those other bets. They're scary. They're bad. You know enough math. So those are the places to go. You want good food at a reasonable price. You want to go places that incent people to come. The secondary casinos are desperate for people. Right? The top casinos don't need to offer discounts. Odd question, but I'll take it.
Hi, Bruce. My name's Damien. Hi. I was hoping you could talk about the advancements by NIST in quantum computing and the risk to public key cryptography.
All right, quantum computing is interesting. Quantum computing, it's largely theoretical, right? We have a quantum computer we've built that factors 15, I believe. And maybe it's a little bit bigger now. But there's a sort of a theoretical way of doing computing that's non-Newtonian, where things happen in parallel. And the question you ask, what the hell good's a quantum computer for? It's not actually good for a lot. But it turns out that the easiest thing a quantum computer can do is factor large numbers. And the second easiest thing it can do is discrete log problems. So basically, a quantum computer is a public key cryptography killer. Right? That's its core application. Against everything else, it's so you can have that problem. The other thing you have, that's what makes Vegas interesting, is a lot of Vegas is subsidized by gamblers. Right? Go to places that want to have gamblers. Right? That's where they're going to get the food cheap because gamblers are subsidizing it. Right? This is a very weird economy here because stuff tends not to be normally priced. And you know, I gave a talk a long time ago on hacking Las Vegas. And one of the ways to hack Vegas, one of your best bets for value, bets is a bad word, is sportsbook. Because you can go to one of those sportsbook rooms, bet on a football game, and basically drink for free for a couple of hours. Right? Because the turnover is so low. So for Vegas, you know, one, best way to win is not to play. Two, if you're going to play and you want free drinks and play cheap, sportsbook is good. And three, if you want to play and know you're going to lose and have fun, my advice has always been the craps table. Because unlike any other game, you're all in it together. Right? You all win together, you all lose together. Hard to tell what it can do. At a theoretical level, the maximum it can do is decrease the complexity of any computation by a factor of a square root. Effectively, that means in symmetric cryptography, halving the key. Right? So if you have a 128-bit key that's secure against all computers, which it is, someone invents a quantum computer, you need a 256-bit key to get the same level of security. So against symmetric cryptography, quantum computers are not an issue. Right? It's really easy to double a key length. Against public key cryptography, it is a huge big deal because it could make our basic public key algorithms obsolete. Right? It can make factoring easy. It can make it linear. Now, things aren't all bad. There are a number of public key algorithms that use coding theory. Some of them been in the 70s and 80s, a little work in the 90s. Largely, they're only done by coding theorists, and we cryptographers ignore them because it is so obscure and so inefficient compared to RSA or Diffie-Hellman that we don't need them. But they do exist, and they would be secure against quantum computation as far as we know today. So when you look at quantum computers, looking into the science fiction future, it does have the potential of changing things, but not all that much. It doesn't make secrecy go away. It doesn't make a cryptography go away. It doesn't even make public key cryptography go away. It makes certain algorithms go away, and it makes certain algorithms insecure. And I think quantum computing is great. I love the theory. But, is it going to be practical in our lifetimes? It's hard to know. Right now there are some very, very severe limitations, like making the I/O work. But, we're really good at this. This is now turning into engineering. When we come back here in 10 years, there might be a quantum computing room at DEFCON. That'd be kind of fun.
I'm a college professor from Canada, and I teach a survey course in security to first-year software engineering students. I use a lot of DEFCON videos and a lot of the expert content because they're not overly technical at this point. What advice would you have for me to try and what should I try and communicate to the students, and what advice would you give to them, seeing that they'll probably be seeing